I grew up knowing my place in my family, and it was never the one anyone was proud of. From as far back as I can remember, I was the disappointing child, the one my parents spoke about in lowered voices, usually right after praising my sister. Rachel was their miracle, their golden girl, the daughter they bragged about to strangers. I was the cautionary tale they used when they thought I wasn't listening. My mother once said it out loud at the dinner table, smiling like it was a harmless joke. Lily just never lived up to her potential. Not like her sister. Everyone laughed. I didn't. For years, I tried harder. I shrank myself. I apologized for existing. And when I finally walked away from my family with a single suitcase and no safety net, they told me I'd regret it. What none of us expected was this. The moment I stopped being their failure, my golden child sister's perfect life began to fall apart. My earliest memories aren't of birthdays or holidays. They're of comparisons. Rachel learned to walk early. See? She's so advanced, my mother would say, clapping proudly. When I took my first steps months later, my dad just nodded and said, "Everyone develops differently, I guess." That word, guess, followed me my entire life. At school, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Rachel brought home straight A's, gold stars plastered across her notebooks. Our fridge became her personal trophy wall. When I brought home a report card with mostly B's, my mom frowned like I'd personally disappointed her. "Why can't you focus like your sister?" she'd ask, tapping the paper with her nail. I remember staring at the floor, cheeks burning, wondering how two kids from the same house could feel like they belonged to different families. Rachel was loud, confident, effortlessly charming. Teachers adored her. Parents compared their kids to her. At family gatherings, aunts and uncles would pinch her cheeks and say, "You're going to be someone important someday." Then they'd turn to me and add, "And you, well, you're sweet." Sweet. That was always the word they used when they didn't know what else to say. By middle school, it was clear who mattered more. Rachel joined every club imaginable: debate, cheerleading, student council. My parents never missed her events. They sat front row, cameras ready, cheering like she was already famous. I, on the other hand, spent my afternoons in the art room, hands covered in charcoal and paint, finally feeling calm. When I excitedly told my mom I'd won a small local art contest, she smiled politely and said, "That's nice, Lily. Did Rachel tell you about her speech competition?" The night of my awards ceremony still haunts me. I stood on stage, scanning the crowd, hoping, stupidly, that they'd surprise me. They never showed. Later, my mom explained it away casually. "Rachel had an important tournament. You understand, right?" I nodded, even though my chest felt hollow. At home, the comparisons never stopped. If Rachel laughed, my parents laughed harder. If I spoke up, I was told not to interrupt. Once, after dinner, I overheard my mom whisper to my dad, "I worry about Lily. She just doesn't have Rachel's drive." I stood frozen in the hallway, realizing something that would shape my entire life. No matter what I did, I would always be measured against my sister, and found lacking. That was when I first learned how to disappear quietly inside my own family. I used to believe that growing up would change things, that once we were adults, my parents would stop comparing us like competing projects. I was wrong. Adulthood didn't erase the hierarchy in our family, it just made it more obvious. Rachel went to an Ivy League school. The day her acceptance letter arrived, my parents opened a bottle of wine like it was New Year's Eve. My mom cried happy tears. My dad called every relative within driving distance. "Our daughter is going places," he kept saying, pride swelling in his voice. A year later, when I told them I decided to attend a state college to study illustration, the room went silent. My mom's smile froze. "Art?" she repeated, like I'd said I wanted to drop out and join a circus. My dad cleared his throat. "How exactly do you plan to make a living with that?" Rachel leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, watching me the way someone watches a child make a bad decision. "Are you sure that's practical?" she asked softly. "I just don't want you to struggle." She said it kindly, which somehow made it worse. College was the first time I felt like I could breathe. I worked hard. I stayed up late drawing until my fingers cramped. I made the dean's list twice. I even had a professor tell me I had real talent, words I replayed in my head whenever doubt crept in. But every time I shared good news with my family, it evaporated in seconds. "That's nice, Lily," my mom would say over the phone, distracted. Then, without missing a beat, "Did I tell you Rachel just got an internship at a top firm?" After graduation, the gap between us turned into a canyon. Rachel landed a high-paying job at a prestigious law firm. My parents helped her with rent, furniture, everything. When she visited home, it felt like a royal event. Her favorite meals, fresh flowers, endless praise. I was still living with my parents, juggling freelance illustration work and part-time jobs. Every dinner felt like an interrogation. "Any interviews? Have you thought about a real career? You're not getting any younger, you know." One night, I tried to talk about a small project I'd landed, illustrations for a local magazine. I barely made it through one sentence before my mom interrupted. "Rachel's thinking of buying an apartment," she announced proudly. My dad beamed. Rachel smiled, just slightly. That was when it hit me. It didn't matter that I was working, trying, surviving. In their eyes, I wasn't behind. I was defective. I watched my sister soak up their admiration like it was oxygen, while I sat there wondering how two women raised in the same house could end up so unequal. I started to feel smaller every day. Like no matter how far I went, I would always be standing in Rachel's shadow, quiet, invisible, and never quite enough. For a long time, I told myself I could endure it. I had survived years of comparisons, subtle digs, and polite dismissals. I learned how to swallow my feelings and smile through dinners that left me feeling hollow. But there's only so much a person can take before something inside them finally breaks. The breaking point came on a night I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. I had finally landed a real opportunity, not a favor, not a cute little project, but a legitimate illustration job for a children's book series. When the email came in, I stared at my screen for a full minute, my hands shaking. It wasn't a huge paycheck, but it was proof. Proof that I wasn't delusional. Proof that this path could lead somewhere. I wanted, stupidly, to share that joy with my family. At dinner, the table looked the same as always. My mom had cooked Rachel's favorite dish, even though she was just stopping by. My dad poured wine. The conversation revolved around Rachel's latest courtroom win, her boss's praise, the promotion she was basically guaranteed. "We're so proud of you," my mom said, her voice glowing. When there was finally a pause, I cleared my throat. My heart pounded. "I have some news too," I said. "I got hired to illustrate a children's book series. It's my first big." "That's nice, Lily," my mom cut in, not even looking at me. "But don't you think it's time you found a real job?" The words hit me harder than I expected. A real job. My dad nodded along. "Your mother's right. You can't do this forever." I felt my face burn. "This is a real job," I said, my voice shaking. "It's a start. It could lead to more work." Rachel sighed, like I was exhausting her. "If you want stability," she said smoothly, "I could talk to someone at my firm. Maybe get you an entry-level position. Something more reliable." Something in me snapped. I pushed my chair back, so hard it scraped against the floor. The sound was sharp, violent, impossible to ignore. "I'm done," I said, standing up. "I'm done being the disappointment. I'm done shrinking myself so Rachel can shine brighter." My mom stared at me like I'd slapped her. "Lily, you're being dramatic." "No," I shot back. "I'm finally being honest." I told them everything I'd been holding in for years. How invisible I felt. How every achievement of mine was treated like an inconvenience. How tired I was of being measured against my sister and always coming up short. "I can't stay here anymore," I said. "I'd rather struggle on my own than live in a house where I'm constantly made to feel like a failure." Rachel tried to intervene, her voice syrupy. "You're overreacting. Calm down." But I caught the flicker in her eyes, the satisfaction. She liked this. She liked being the reasonable one while I unraveled. My mom's voice turned cold. "If you walk out now, Don't expect us to help you when you can't make rent. That was it. The final confirmation. I turned away from the table and headed for my room, my hands shaking, my chest tight. Behind me, I could hear my parents calling my name, Rachel saying something about me being irrational. But for the first time in my life, I didn't stop. I closed my bedroom door, leaned against it, and realized with terrifying clarity that everything was about to change. I didn't cry right away. That surprised me. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, staring at the walls I'd grown up with, listening to the muffled sounds of my family arguing in the kitchen. My mother's sharp voice. My father's low, irritated tone. Rachel's calm, measured sighs, like this was all an inconvenience to her evening. I opened my closet and pulled out a suitcase. That was when my hands started shaking. I threw clothes in without folding them. Jeans. Sweaters. Whatever was closest. Every item felt like a countdown. 10 minutes earlier, this had still been my home. Now it felt like a place I was escaping from. The door flew open behind me. "What do you think you're doing?" my mom demanded. I didn't turn around. "Packing." My dad stepped in next, his face tight. "You're not seriously leaving over one conversation?" I laughed, a short, broken sound. "One conversation? Try my entire life." Rachel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with that familiar expression. Concern on the surface, superiority underneath. "Lily, you're being emotional," she said. "You always do this when things don't go your way." That did it. I spun around to face her. "When things don't go my way?" I snapped. "You mean when I finally speak up instead of swallowing everything so you can stay perfect?" Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "I'm just trying to help." "No," I shot back. "You're trying to keep me beneath you." My mom gasped like I'd said something unforgivable. "How dare you talk to your sister like that?" I felt years of silence burning in my throat. "How dare you treat me like I'm worth less?" My dad rubbed his temples. "This is ridiculous. Where are you even going to go?" I zipped the suitcase shut with more force than necessary. "That's not your problem anymore." My mom's voice dropped, turning sharp and cruel. "If you leave now, don't come crawling back when you fail. We're not going to support you financially while you play artist." There it was, the threat disguised as tough love. The final confirmation that love, in this family, had always been conditional. I picked up the suitcase and brushed past them. My mom tried to grab my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve. "Lily, stop. You're making a huge mistake." I pulled away. "No. I've been living one." Rachel shook her head slowly, like she was disappointed in me. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "You don't survive out there without us." I looked at her, really looked at her. Perfect hair. Perfect posture. A life cushioned by my parents' money and praise. "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'll fail on my own terms." The house felt unreal as I walked through it. The framed photos on the wall, all of Rachel. Her graduation. Her awards. Her smiling face frozen in time. I realized there wasn't a single picture of just me. At the front door, I hesitated. Part of me wanted someone, anyone, to stop me. To say, "Wait. You matter. Stay." No one did. I stepped outside into the cold night air, my breath coming out in shaky clouds. I loaded my suitcase into my car, my movements mechanical, like if I slowed down I'd fall apart. When I turned the key in the ignition, I glanced back at the house. My mom was crying. My dad looked furious. And Rachel was standing slightly behind them, arms folded, her lips pressed into a thin, satisfied line. That image burned itself into my memory. As I pulled out of the driveway, my chest finally cracked open. Tears blurred the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. I felt grief for the family I wished I'd had. Rage for the years I'd wasted trying to earn love. Terror about what came next. But beneath all of it, quiet, unfamiliar, and undeniable, was relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the disappointing daughter sitting at their table. I was just a woman driving into the unknown, terrified and finally free. I didn't know how I was going to survive. I didn't know where I'd end up. All I knew was this: I wasn't going back. The first night after I left, I slept on my friend Megan's couch, staring at the ceiling until sunrise. The room smelled like laundry detergent and old coffee, and every unfamiliar sound made my heart jump. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with a message telling me to come home. It never did. And somehow, that hurt more than if it had. I told myself it was temporary. Just a few days. I'd figure something out. Reality hit fast. Within a week, I realized how unprepared I was for total independence. Rent prices were brutal. My savings looked embarrassingly small once I started doing the math. I refreshed my email obsessively, praying for work to come in. When nothing did, the voice in my head, my mother's voice, crept back in. You should have stayed. You're not built for this. I swallowed my pride and applied for a part-time job at a local coffee shop. The manager barely looked at my resume before handing me an apron. My hands ached from drawing all night and steaming milk all morning. Some days, I worked 12 hours straight. Illustrations during the day, lattes until close. I came home smelling like espresso and ink, collapsing onto the couch with my sketchbook still open on my chest. It was exhausting, but it was mine. After 2 weeks, I found a tiny studio apartment I could just barely afford. The place was cramped and dim, with a crooked window and a heater that rattled like it might explode. I didn't care. When I signed the lease, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from something dangerously close to pride. Moving in felt surreal. No parents watching. No comments about my life choices. Just silence. For the first time, the silence wasn't judgmental. It was peaceful. That peace didn't last. My parents started calling. At first, it was anger. You're being selfish. You embarrassed us. Then it shifted to guilt. We're worried about you. Are you eating? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every voicemail reopened wounds I was barely holding together. Rachel called too. Her tone never changed.
Calm.
Patronizing. This isn't a game, Lily, she said once. You can't just walk away from family.
Come home.
Apologize. Mom and Dad are giving you a chance. A chance. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong. There were nights I lay on my mattress, still on the floor, staring at my unfinished illustrations, wondering if she was right. My bank account was shrinking. My hands cramped. I was tired in a way sleep didn't fix. I imagined my parents' warm kitchen, the fridge always full, the safety I'd thrown away. But then I'd look at my work, pages of characters slowly coming to life. Worlds I'd built with my own hands. Proof that even when everything else felt unstable, this part of me was real. One night, after a particularly brutal shift at the cafe, I checked my email half expecting another rejection. Instead, there was a message from a publisher. My breath caught. My heart slammed against my ribs as I opened it, afraid it would disappear if I blinked. They'd seen my portfolio. They wanted to talk. I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, back against the wall, and laughed until I cried. Not because everything was suddenly okay, but because for the first time since I'd left, the future didn't feel like a cliff. It felt like a door. And I was still standing. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sketching at my desk, sunlight spilling across the paper like it finally belonged to me. I almost didn't answer. The number was my mother's. Her voice sounded different, thin, unsteady, stripped of its usual authority. Lily, she said, and for the first time in my life, she sounded afraid. We need to talk. That was how I learned the truth. Rachel had been fired. At first, I didn't understand. Fired wasn't a word that belonged to my sister. Rachel didn't fail. Rachel didn't stumble. Rachel didn't fall. But my mom kept talking, the words tumbling out between quiet sobs. An internal investigation. Falsified billing hours.
Clients overcharged. No warningness.
Immediate termination. I sat there in silence, my pencil hovering uselessly above the page. Then came the rest. The part my parents hadn't bragged about for years. Rachel had been living far beyond her means, luxury apartment, designer clothes, expensive dinners. When the paycheck stopped, everything collapsed. Credit card debt, missed payments, an eviction notice taped to her door. "We've already given her so much money," my mom whispered. "We don't know what to do." I felt something twist inside me.
Shock.
Sadness. And, buried beneath it all, a feeling I hated myself for recognizing vindication. A week later, my parents asked me to come to dinner. I almost said no. Therapy had taught me that just because someone finally wanted to talk didn't mean I owed them access. But something told me I needed to see it with my own eyes, not for them, but for myself. The house looked the same. Same walls. Same furniture. But the air felt heavier. Rachel was already there when I arrived. She didn't look like herself. Her hair was pulled back messily. Dark circles framed her eyes. She barely glanced up when I walked in. For the first time in my life, she looked small. Dinner was tense and quiet.
No praise. No bragging.
No glowing stories. My parents kept exchanging worried looks, like they were afraid one wrong word would shatter what was left of their perfect illusion. Finally, Rachel snapped. "So this is it," she said, slamming her fork down. "You're all just going to sit there and judge me?" My dad tried to calm her. "We're just trying to help." Rachel laughed, sharp and bitter. "Help? You didn't help enough. You let me take all the pressure. You needed me to be perfect." Then she turned on me. "And you," she said, eyes blazing. "You abandoned us. You left when things got hard." I felt the familiar urge to shrink, to apologize just to keep the peace. But something had changed. I met her gaze. "No," I said evenly. "I left when staying was destroying me." The room went silent. I told them everything they'd never wanted to hear. About my apartment, my work, the contracts I'd signed, the fact that I was supporting myself completely, finally, without their help. My mom stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. We didn't know," she whispered. "You never asked," I replied. Rachel scoffed. "This is temporary," she snapped. "Your little art career won't last." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Maybe," I said. "But right now it's real. And it's mine." Rachel stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. The same sound mine had made the night I left. "I can't do this," she said, grabbing her coat. "I don't need this." She stormed out, the door slamming behind her. After she left, my parents broke. My mother cried openly, apologizing between gasps. My father looked older than I'd ever seen him. "We were wrong," he admitted quietly. "We put too much on both of you." For years, I dreamed of hearing those words. Now that they were finally spoken, they didn't feel like victory. They asked me if I would consider moving back home, helping out, being closer. I took a deep breath. "No," I said gently. "But I'm willing to build something new, with boundaries." As I drove home that night, I realized the power had shifted completely. I wasn't the disappointing daughter begging to be chosen anymore. I was the one standing on solid ground, watching the pedestal finally crumble. And for the first time, I understood something painful and freeing at the same time. Rachel hadn't been strong all those years. She'd just been protected. And I had survived without any protection at all. After that dinner, something strange happened. The chaos stopped chasing me. For weeks, I'd expected more calls, more accusations, more guilt disguised as concern. But instead, there was silence, thick, uncertain, and new. My parents didn't demand that I come home. They didn't offer advice I hadn't asked for. When my mom did call, her voice was softer, careful, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing and losing me again. I realized then how much power I'd been giving them my entire life. Rachel disappeared completely.
No texts.
No calls. No passive-aggressive messages sent through my parents. The sister who had once dominated every room simply vanished from my world. I heard through my mom that she'd moved to another city, to start over. I imagined her somewhere unfamiliar, without the safety net she'd always relied on, and felt a complicated knot of emotions tighten in my chest. I wasn't happy about her downfall. But I wasn't responsible for saving her either. Therapy helped me understand that both things could be true at once. I could grieve the sister I'd never really had while still protecting the woman I was becoming. I could acknowledge the damage without letting it define me anymore. My parents tried awkwardly to rebuild something with me. They asked about my work. They listened. Sometimes, when I talked about my projects, I caught my mom smiling in a way that felt genuine. Other times, old habits surfaced. A comparison slipped out. A suggestion I hadn't asked for. And this time I stopped it. "We're not doing that anymore," I said once, calmly, my heart racing. They apologized. And they meant it. I didn't move back home. I didn't offer financial help. I didn't step into the role of the good daughter to replace the one who'd fallen. Instead, I set boundaries that felt terrifying at first, and then empowering. Visits on my terms. Conversations I could leave. Love without conditions. Slowly, I began to notice how different my life felt without constant judgment buzzing in the background. I laughed more. I slept better. I stopped flinching every time my phone rang. I no longer felt the need to justify my existence. One evening, sitting alone in my apartment, I spread my work across the floor, finished illustrations, new concepts, rejected drafts I'd learned from instead of taking personally. I thought about the girl I'd been, standing in the hallway as a child, listening to my parents whisper about how I wasn't enough. I wished I could go back and tell her something. That she wasn't broken. That she wasn't behind. That she wasn't failing at life. She was just living the wrong version of it. Letting go of resentment didn't happen all at once. Some days, it still creeps in quietly. But I've learned that healing isn't about pretending the past didn't hurt. It's about refusing to let it decide who you are. I didn't win. I didn't lose either. I chose myself. And for the first time, that choice felt like enough. A year ago, if you had asked me what success looked like, I would have described my sister's life. The title, the salary, the approval that came so easily to her and never to me. Success, to me, used to mean finally being chosen. Now, my definition is unrecognizable. Success is waking up in a space I paid for with my own work, even if it's imperfect, even if the floors creak and the walls are thin. It's sitting at my desk in the quiet morning hours, coffee cooling beside me, doing work that feels honest. It's opening emails from publishers who want my ideas, not because I fit someone else's mold, but because I finally trusted my own voice. My career has continued to grow. Slowly. Steadily. Not in flashy leaps, but in meaningful steps. I've illustrated more books, taken on commissions I never would have believed I deserved, and even spoken at a local school about creative careers. Standing in front of those students, watching them listen with wide, hopeful eyes, I felt something shift inside me. For so long, I'd been told I was the example of what not to become. Now, I was proof that there are many ways to build a life, and none of them require permission. My relationship with my parents is different. Not perfect. Probably never will be. But it's honest. They ask before giving opinions now. They listen more than they speak. Sometimes I catch regret flickering across my mother's face when she watches me talk about my work, and I wonder how many moments we both lost while she was focused on someone else's path. I don't punish them for it. I don't excuse it either. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to live inside it. Rachel remains a ghost on the edge of my life. I don't know if she's happy. I don't know if she's healed. Part of me hopes she is. Another part understands that her journey is no longer mine to carry. We were both shaped by the same family, but in very different ways. She learned to survive through perfection. I learned to survive without protection. And maybe that's why I'm still standing. If there's one thing this experience has taught me, it's this. Being labeled the disappointing child doesn't mean you lack value. Sometimes it means you were brave enough to want something different. Sometimes it means you didn't fit because the space itself was too small. Walking away from my family was the hardest thing I've ever done. It cost me comfort, security, the illusion of belonging. But it gave me something I never had before, self-respect. To anyone reading this who has ever felt invisible in their own family, who has been compared, minimized, or made to feel like love must be earned, you are not broken. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are allowed to leave environments that hurt you. You are allowed to define success on your own terms. You are allowed to choose yourself, even if no one claps when you do. Sometimes, the life you're meant to live only begins after you stop trying to be the person everyone else wanted you to be. I was never the family's golden child, but I finally became something better. I became my own.